why did Paul circumcise Timothy? Yeah. Right. Yeah, and his father was a Greek. That seemed to be the biggest issue. So he needed to be circumcised. Not probably, because they were going to go into synagogues and stuff like that. That's going to be an issue. That's right. That's the verse I was thinking of too. Why did Paul go to Macedonia? Just on a whim? He got a calling. The Macedonian call was a vision. Acts 16:9. What two conversions do we read about in chapter 16? Right, and Lydia. That's right. Who were more fair-minded than those of Thessalonica, and why? Where did Paul go after Berea? Yep.
Okay, thank you all for coming this morning. We'll be looking at the book of Esther and the life of Esther. And I forgot everything I was going to say before class, but anyway. That's okay. That's okay. I'm getting old and forgetful. I'm going to ask Jim Wilkinson if he will lead us in a word of prayer as we begin. Amen. Esther. I'm going to give you a real quick run through on Esther as we begin. The first event is this king. In some versions he's called Ahasuerus. Other versions he's called what? Xerxes. And he's going to have someone after him who reigns named what? Artaxerxes. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Xerxes is in power over which empire? The Persian Empire. Now, when Daniel saw that great figure of that really relates to the kingdoms that would be in power through time, what was the first great kingdom? Babylon. It had the head of gold. And next we have which kingdom? And then that's where we are in Esther. Right there in Esther during that time. After that we have the Grecian Empire, and then we have the Roman Empire, during which time the big rock comes from out of nowhere and smashes all the other kingdoms, and that's the church. That's Jesus Christ establishing his church, his kingdom that rules in the hearts of men. So this king Ahasuerus is in power. Xerxes, I'm going to call him Xerxes. Let's see. Esther goes to Xerxes in chapter 2 and verse 16, chapter 3 and verse 7. I'm just jumping through this. Haman. Who is Haman? Second in command. He's the number 2 man, very powerful, got some vanity going on we'll find out about. Chapter 3, verse 12, Haman gets Xerxes to authorize his decree. In chapter 3 and verse 13, they plan the date of the annihilation of the Jews. chapter 8 and verse 9, Mordecai. Who is Mordecai? Yeah, cousin. You're right. Yeah, the Bible goes kind of roundabout to say that, but he's her cousin. Chapter 8 and verse 12 and chapter 9 and verse 1. Mordecai, okay, in chapter 8 and verse 9, Mordecai issues a decree authorized by King Xerxes to allow the Jews to defend themselves. So they prepared themselves to defend themselves. Then finally, at the culmination of it, Haman and how many sons of his were executed? Somebody besides Chris. That's okay. I mean, y'all know this backwards and forwards, I know. But there were 10 that were, and how were they executed? I couldn't hear. Yeah, he was good. Haman had this gallows prepared. How tall was them gallows? Really? I thought it was 70 cubits. Oh well, we'll get to that. But anyway, I thought, wow, that's pretty high. Pretty high. He wanted everybody to be able to see, make an exhibition out of it, yet he was the one who was hung there first, and then his 10 sons were hanged there and executed. Okay, now, in the, I've got a note on my phone that I'm trying to get to. As we begin our study of Esther, let's turn in our Bibles to Genesis chapter 1 and verse 6. And I'm going to ask Jonathan to read chapter 1 and verse 6 in Genesis.
God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, that divides the waters from the waters."
Okay, we got the firmament. And what have I said about the firmament? What I said was wrong, but did anybody remember what I said about firmament? That's great. That's great. Because what I said was wrong. The word I had said, I was wrong about this. I had said they just made up a word firmament to go in there because they didn't know what else to use. It wasn't like that. The word originally comes from the Latin Vulgate. Based on, I wasn't there, okay? I wasn't there when that happened. So I've got to accept what other people have written about how that happened. And so the reading that I believe was a reliable source says there was a Catholic Pope in about 380 that wanted a new version of the Latin Bible. And so he knew that Jerome was a wonderful scholar, expert in the languages, and so he told Jerome, get you a bunch of scholars and y'all make a new Latin Bible for the Catholic Church. If I get something wrong, somebody hold up your hand and I'll be glad to correct. As he's doing that, Jerome be ripping along through here, and he gets to Genesis 1 and verse 6, and they come across this word, firmament, in the King James, that they have to figure out how to translate. Now, here's where context comes into play. They had a conception of our planet and our universe that was kind of like we were in a snow globe. And there was some kind of a shield separating us below from the heavens above, from the actual heaven where God resides. And so this word, it's a Hebrew word that means an expanse, a firm thing, firm firm thing. And so he said, let's call it a firmament. Let's call it a firmament. And that's what, in their minds, in their concept of how this whole planet holds together inside this big snow globe. I mean, I'm calling it that. It's kind of funny, but that's what the drawings looked like that I saw. And that firmament is a shield or a barrier that separates things that we can know in the earth and the sky and the air and the water and everything on earth, the land, from the actual heavens where God resides. And so firmament stuck. And so when the guys came along to make the King James Bible and many other English Bibles leading up to that, they continued to use the word firmament, the one that Jerome inserted in there way back in 380. I wasn't there, so I'm going on what the authorities I've read. And but some other translations have now changed that word to something else because we now have a better, more scientific concept of the universe and especially the earth that we live on. I mean, we've actually had people go outside, break through the firmament, and take pictures and show us what things look like from outside. And so I'm going to ask Chris Benson if he would read chapter 1 and verse 6 in Genesis.
Then God said, let there be an expanse in the waters, and let it separate the water from the water.
An expanse. That's a better word because it not a shield, it's just an expanse of expanse. I don't know what else to call it. But that's how the word firmament got there and eventually was changed in most translations to the word expanse. Okay, and then there was Esther. Yes. I'll have to go check with Jerome. I don't know. Does anybody else have an idea? There was a breaking up of the waters above the earth and the waters on the earth, and those waters came pouring down like never before. So perhaps there was a water shield above our atmosphere that God allowed to drain through and flood the earth. Yes.
I don't know if this answers the question, but it's an interesting reference. Peter 3, 5, and 6 is for further study. Second Peter 3, 5, and 6.
You want to read it for us?
Well, it says, for when they maintain this, it escapes them to defy the word of God that existed long ago. And the earth was formed out of water and by water, through which the world at that time was destroyed by being flooded with water.
Okay. That's the answer. That's our best answer. Whatever that means, however it works out physically, that's true. May not understand it completely. There's no videotape. You can't go on YouTube and find it. But, yeah, videotape. Y'all remember videotape? Okay. Did you have something, Elizabeth? Okay. Moving on to Esther. The time frame. This is, does anybody know about what time frame Esther existed? The book was written, the time frame of the events in Esther. Yeah, go ahead and read that. Yeah, Ezra, that's what I got from the book. That's about the time frame when these things happen. So Ezra is over in Jerusalem. What is Ezra's primary responsibility when Ezra is in Jerusalem? They just returned, some had just returned from Babylonian captivity. What was Ezra up to? He was rebuilding the temple. That's right. He was rebuilding the temple, and then a little bit later, another Old Testament man came along, again returning with another group from Babylonian captivity. And what was his name? Goes along with Ezra. Nehemiah. What was Nehemiah's main focus? He did the walls. Yeah, he got busy working on the walls, so they would have some better defense against those. They still had enemies that wanted to stop them. Let's see. The Persian Empire. This is the second great empire from the time of the image that Daniel saw. Babylon, Persia, Greece, and then Rome. The recent rulers include Jehoiachin. Who was he ruling over? Judah. This is approximate time frames. Just to keep us in mind, the other rulers in the world during this time. Did you have something else? Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that question, because we got a map right here. Okay, now the map is, I'm sure, not easy to read. I've never been able to read them more than 2 or 3 rows back, but Assyria, I believe, was to the north of the land of Palestine, the Promised Land. They were somewhat to the north. Now, through the magic of computers, we've got, magic. The green arrow is pointing to Jerusalem. I know you can't read all of this. It's pointing to Jerusalem. The blue arrow is pointing to Babylon, and the red arrow is pointing to a little place called Susa. Why would there be an arrow pointing to Susa? Yeah, that was their capital. That was where Xerxes was reigning from. And actually, I looked a little further. There's a black line leading from Susa, kind of arcs, leading from Susa along the mountains to Atbella, and then eventually up to something I can't pronounce, and then Cappadocia. That black line represents a highway that was part of the Persian Empire. They wanted to have a good road going that way for some reason, so they had this road indicated by that black line. And how far away did Xerxes, what was the expanse of his rule?
It was bigger than almost any.
It went.
It was bigger. It stretched farther than Babylon.
Yeah. It went over to India.
Yeah, it was very large.
And they had 127 provinces. Anybody know about how big one of their provinces might be? Something we can kind of relate to. I figure it's kind of like a state. In the United States, we've got 50 states. They had 127 provinces that covered the civilized world at that time. And so,
They're very small states, if you think about it that way. Because in this area of the world, if you just plop that right down to the United States, I mean, you could fit, I don't know how many of those
That's what I'm going to do this afternoon. I'm going to get me something and plop it over there.
Yeah, pop it over there. They come like, that idea, because people, places are far back then because they're walking, riding.
Right, right.
But like if we were to ride a car, it wouldn't take very long to get from over here to over here.
I did want to mention, based on there's a very small scale of miles in the very bottom right of this, and just ballparking it, I didn't get out and measure. Did you have something? Okay, the scale of miles would indicate, I would say it's about 200 miles from Babylon to Susa, about 200 miles. And then going from Babylon back to Jerusalem is many hundreds of miles. I've never traveled that, but it's many hundreds of miles. Yes. I am so glad you brought that up. Right. And yes, there were other empires. Like now, we like to think that the United States is the ruling empire of the world, but there are many other empires also ruling that we try to have peaceful relations with. Or else we kill them, you know. So we're not much different from the Romans. Anyway, going through Esther a little bit more, I've decided to take a slightly different path in discussing Esther. And she's looking at me with those mean eyes, like I just did something wrong. You know, she's giving me the death stare. Okay, I've got a list. I've got a list of the principal people in the book of Esther, and we're going to use that list to go through the events that happened during Esther. And here we go. First of all, we've got in chapters 1, verse 1 and verse 9, there's two characters, Xerxes and Vashti. We've already talked about Xerxes being the ruler of this empire. Who is Vashti? She's the queen. And what role did she play in the story of Esther? Yeah, Xerxes was having this great big, I think it was a drunken party, and with all of his rulers of the governors, if you will, of all the different provinces, they were there. They were having a big time, a bunch of men going around, and then he said, yeah, I got the prettiest woman you've ever seen to be my queen. You ain't gonna believe this, guys. And he wanted her to come out and present herself in all her beauty and glory to a bunch of drunken men. And so she said, no, I will not. And so Xerxes consulted with 7 princes. In chapter 1, verse 10 and verse 14, that's the word my Bible uses, the princes. And what did they tell him? They were his advisors. They were his chief advisors. What did they tell him? Can't let those women act up. That's I didn't say it. I'm just repeating what the man said. Okay. And so, yeah, that's what it was. And, we can't have a woman failing to obey an order, a direct order from the ruler. And so I'm surprised they didn't kill her. I'm very surprised they did not kill her, but he banished her from his presence, and she was no longer had the rights and privileges associated with being the queen. So then we have Mordecai. Does anybody remember which tribe he was from? He's a Benjamite. Somebody tell me one, maybe two things they remember about the tribe of Benjamin. That's exactly something I would expect you to remember. Almost got wiped out. They were the smallest in number. And who was Benjamin's parents? Rachel. Was Benjamin born first or last? First or last? First. I think he was, no, Joseph was born first. Benjamin was born last. Did Rachel die during childbirth of Benjamin? Okay. Yeah. Okay. And because that happened while they were, welcome, please come in. We're discussing the book of Esther as you get seated. Benjamin, and she was buried away from, there was a specific burial ground that Abraham had purchased to bury Sarah, I believe, and that was the family burial ground. She died while they were traveling. She was away from that, and she was not buried there. Okay. So Mordecai comes along, and he also has someone under his care named Esther. Esther is I want to say she was a young woman under his care. And how did that come to be, and what is Esther's relation to Mordecai? Right. He was under her care. We might say he was adopted. Maybe, I don't know if there was any legal documents drawn up, but he treated her as his own daughter and finished raising her. And in verse 7, the New American Standard says he was bringing up a different name, Hadassah, which is also Esther's name. That is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother. Now the young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So what was her relationship to Mordecai? Uncle's daughter. What would that make them? Cousins. Yeah, they kind of a roundabout way to say cousins. Does any other translation have cousins? Okay. Then we talked about Esther's parents, and as the events unfold, it almost like, a Disney movie. The princess, the bad princess, gets banished. They got to find a new princess. And so they gather up all the beautiful women that might be qualified to be princesses or queens, that might be qualified to be queens. And they brought them into the king's care that he might pick one to be the new queen. And she was one of those. She was also Jewish, probably the only Jewish woman that was part of that group that was taken into the custody of the king in a good way, that they might prepare themselves to see which one the king might choose to be queen. And she never revealed her heritage, her religion, and her ancestry until, stay tuned. Yes.
So I think it's important to note so that we don't have rose-colored glasses on.
Right.
It's not a beauty
Right.
contest where they're coming in and, oh, you're
He's
beautiful, you're
making up a
fine.
harem.
It's a harem.
Yeah.
Is what it is. It's a harem. And do that with the eunuchs and stuff. And there's nothing like explicit about that in Esther. You just kind of have to know that that's
Yeah.
what it is. So this is a very gruesome thing. Like this is not this.
This wouldn't make a Disney movie?
It wouldn't.
Okay.
Like it's like it's not like that.
Okay.
It's this is just a very I don't know.
But did
We're all
she,
adults in here.
do you think she had opportunity to not be part of that? Or do you think she wanted to be part of that or was forced into it?
I think she'd probably just take
Okay.
just
Somebody went out looking around and said, hey, there's a pretty girl. There's a good one.
yeah.
Okay.
And so when we see God, we're going to talk about God's providence in this story. This is God using a very worldly system, a very demented, just bad system, like to bring about His purposes. I think it's important for us to know that as we study this, that this is not all shiny and pretty.
Okay. I'm not going to say any more. I don't want to get us distracted on something else. But anyway, she was, yes. Okay. Cousin. Well, good. New International says cousins. Okay. Thank you. You kind of got to draw a picture when you're reading the King James or the New American Standard. You know, this one, and he's an uncle. So, okay. Then, so now we have Haggai and Shazgaz and Haggai. Who are they, and why are they important parts of this story of Esther? He was in charge of the women, is that right? 2:8. So it came about when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa, I'm in chapter 2, verse 8, into the custody of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace, into the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. So again, we're talking about a harem there. Now the young lady pleased him, found favor with him, so he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and food, gave her 7 choice maids from the king's palace, and transferred her and her maids to the best place in New American Standard says harem. Esther did not make known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make them known. Now let's see, we got there. Who is Abihail? Abihail was her mother? Chapter 2, verse 15. Let's see. Yeah, Abihail. So Abihail is a man. Yeah, it's not, Anyway, he was the uncle of Mordecai. In verse 15, she did not request anything special of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. Esther was taken, verse 16, to King Ahasuerus to his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth in the year of his reign. Again, part of a harem, something's going to happen that's rated R or worse. Is that a bell? I'm hearing bells, man. Okay. Who are Big Than and T-Resh? They were making a plot to kill the king. And Bigthan and Teresh making a plot to kill the king. Who is the king? Xerxes. Thank you. They were making a plot. And was the plot carried through? Or do we have to wait till next week and come back and see the conclusion? Yeah, Mordecai heard about it, sent message to the king, and they were able to thwart that attempt to assassinate King Xerxes. Mordecai was not really rewarded at that time, but there was a notation made in the chronicles of the king, the writings of the king that documented what he was doing. Then we get to Haman and chapter 3 and verse 1. Eventually we'll talk about Zeresh in chapter 5 and verse 10. So who is Haman? Second to the king. And why is he important in this story? I didn't understand what you said. He had too much pride. And he did not like Mordecai. Since Haman was in such good relations with the king, he was able to get the king to issue a decree that everybody should bow in front of Haman when he came by, yet one person did not bow. Yes, Chris? Amalekite. Way back in the days of Saul and Samuel, they didn't get along. They were supposed to be wiped out. Yet here we have one of those descendants, again, stirring up trouble, Haman. Thank you for that. I was going to look into it, and I said, nah, nobody cares about that. Anyway, now who was Zeresh? That was his wife. And so every day he would come home, and you'd think he should be the happiest guy in the kingdom, next to the king. The king would do anything he asked him to do within reason, and everybody would bow when he came along. But that one little guy named Mordecai just wouldn't bow, and Haman couldn't get over that. So anyway, so he'd have to go home every day, and Zeresh would greet him, and did you have a good day at work, man? Everything's okay until I came to Mordecai. And then that just ruined his day. Every time he had to go around Mordecai, it just ruined his day. And he would go home to Zeresh. And now, who was Hathach? It may be spelled differently in other translations. Hathach. Chapter 5 and verse 4. We're almost finished here. Where's the king? King Haman. Well, I've got Hathach in there for some reason. Chapter 4, verse 5. Okay. Oh, those pages were stuck together in my Bible. Chapter 4 and verse 5. Esther summoned Hathach from the king's eunuchs, whom the king... So Mordecai passed word to Esther there was a plot to kill the king. Esther called Hathach and said, give this message to the king so that that plot is thwarted. So he was instrumental in thwarting the plot to kill the king. We'll find out more on Wednesday as we continue. There'll be a slight review, and then we'll get into the questions that are in the book and maybe a couple of other things. Thank you for your attention, and